Look at that. Made it look so easy.
Building our community
at Circle Time,
learning from each other
at Circle Time. When we come together, there's no mountain we can't climb. Come join us for Circle Time.
Welcome to Circle Time with the AECEO, the space for all things related to ECE culture, including the good, the bad, and the sticky. My name is Jess Tomas, and I'm so glad you're here with us. Today, we will get to know more about the AECEO Care Collectives and its impact on the ECE community. In this episode, I can't wait to host a conversation with four incredible early years professionals: Tracy Saarikoski, Tonja Armstrong-Mcinnis, Lyndsay MacKay, and Shelly Mehta.
I think Tracy was the first person in this group that I met when I first started out as the provincial coordinator for the AECEO back in probably 2016. We went all over the province, and I'll never forget when we got to Sudbury and I got to meet Tracy. And Tracy, just your positivity, your smile, your openness was so welcoming, because that was one of the most terrifying things I've ever done, traveling around the province, talking to ECEs and the ECE community about getting more involved in advocacy. And you welcomed us with open arms and brought out the entire Sudbury community to meet us. And that's had such a positive impact on my trajectory.
Thanks for that, Lyndsay. I sit and think about this question about how do we know each other? We don't have to know each other because we belong together as a community of care people around the province. And I think that was a big piece in my own developing of advocacy, and to know that there were people at the AECEO that if I had a question, if I needed to reach out, something was happening in my community, I always knew there was someone there, even though I didn't know them personally.
Tracy and Tonja, you were able to go to the AECEO retreat. How was it different than coming out of Zoom and going into person?
I met Tracy at our Care Collective co-lead retreat. And I'm laughing and smiling because really being in person, Tracy's, I guess, gregariousness came across. Your personality just sort of drew me in, and you were just lighting up when you were talking about different things that you've done and the time that you've been in the field and the different roles that you've had, and sitting around the campfire was an amazing time too. And yeah, I just find your laugh is very beautiful, and it sort of pulls you in. So I appreciate that. Lyndsay, I believe it must have been when you were doing you said 2016, doing the talk. So you came to Humber. I think I was a partial load professor at that point. After that, I left Humber and then connected more on a personal note with you and a couple of other professors. We wanted to connect and build relationship with our learners here in the ECE fields.
We have a couple, actually three now, post-secondary folks. Shelly, I knew Shelly long time ago. I think I had this image of you as a student when I was a student that made you inaccessible because you were a professor and I saw your name on all these things. But then now meeting you and talking with you, I had this sort of similar experience as Tonja, like, oh, we're the same. Oh, we've got like the same ideas about things. Is that something that you find, Shelly, happens?
Oh yeah, you hit the nail on the head right there, because even just thinking about how I know this group in so many different ways, but not directly until we've been meeting, right? For the past year, you hear everyone's names and about the wonderful work everyone's doing. And then you come across everyone maybe a certain event or whatnot. And then you don't really get to know people until you kind of sit and have that one-on-one conversation, or even just as this care collective kind of group. And what I like about this care collective group is that we also get the opportunity to connect every time we meet. It's not just about getting into business. It's about, okay, how's it going? What's going on in the world, right? And so that's exactly the way that I get to know colleagues from other places in terms of their work, is when we're not just connecting because of work. We're connecting on another level in terms of, what are your thoughts? What are your fears? What are your ideas about what's going on in the world? And then thinking about that advocacy piece. And so the way I connect with students is, it takes time, of course, but I think you're right. I think a lot of students just come into the program and they see me as, okay, or even just professors in general, or coordinators, being a coordinator, that we're inaccessible. But as soon as students begin to talk and we begin to chat about, what do you need, what are your needs, etc., the whole dynamic shifts. And I feel like by second year, students are so much more comfortable that we all share kind of the same vision in terms of what the ECE world can look like. I enjoy and I appreciate the ability to connect on a personal level, and it's not always about work. And I think with our students, it's the same thing when you connect with them outside of the classroom. So there's been many times I've run into students, whether it's at a concert, whether it's at a restaurant, or just on the street. And in the past, I used to be like, oh no, what do I do? But now I look forward to it. So I've also grown. I do want to say that I come from a little bit of a unique perspective, where I got to know everybody in this group based on the work that the AECEO is doing. And so whether that's attending somebody's workshop or seeing them in person at an event, like I said, and building those partnerships, you get to meet your people that know and feel that same, or have that same drive in terms of advocacy.
You know, that reminds me, Tonja, you hosted a event for the community of Black ECEs. What was the reasoning behind that, and how did it go?
So there were 6 of us, and we were in this beautiful space at the Center for Excellence that connects to youth in Scarborough. So we introduced ourselves and we sort of talked about, our roles and things like that. And we had a young woman there who had just come from Thunder Bay, and she talked about her experiences as being a racialized woman completing Teachers College up there. So we talked about how things can change, make an impact, and that you feel could be beneficial. That was an interesting topic, and it sort of just morphed into other ones. And similar to what Shelly is saying, we connected on a level that was based in something that we all are passionate about, which is obviously being in the early learning and care field. However, it wasn't directed. It just flowed really well. And yeah, we just engaged. We had a bit of fun with some games. And then we did some mindfulness breathing exercises based off of something that one of the participants is moving into and towards. We talked about some strategies and really how to take care of ourselves as ECEs, and the expectations that we have and the time that we have and what that looks like, and how we use that to really just care for ourselves as we're caring for others. It turned out really quite lovely. We were supposed to wrap up at 3:00, and we ended up having like another round of food at that point. I think similar to Shelly's point as well, meeting people virtually is fantastic. It definitely has its pluses. You can be in the comfort of your home, or taking less time from driving from a place or something like that. But being in person, there's really, I feel like, no substitute for it. And like I was saying, with meeting Tracy in person, you just feel that sense of warmth and understanding of each other. And I often get to like, oh, I didn't realize you were so tall. So there's that different, you have a different perspective, right? When you meet someone in person as you do online. Yeah, we are real. We are 3D. We have a different presence, and that sort of energy, right, that comes across when you're in person. So yeah, we did Scarborough in the east end of the city. We were here on the west end of the city last summer and outside. This time we were inside. Really value community, which is huge in within our own early childhood education community, but definitely amongst, Indigenous folks and racialized folks, right? Community and getting together and supporting each other is huge. We want to make sure that always is a piece of what we do in our care collective.
I just wanted to commend you, Tonja, for having, I know from experience how much work goes into hosting an in-person gathering. And I used to evaluate an in-person gathering based on like how many people came. And you said you had, 3 people in addition to your 3 leads. And, old me would have said like, I wish more people had come. But listening to you talk about the gathering and the person who came from Thunder Bay and was able to share that experience with you and able to talk openly about what it was like being a racialized person in a small town. That is so important and so meaningful and probably meant a lot.
Yeah.
To not only that person to be able to come and meet you and the other participants, but to feel that care.
Exactly.
Right. And I think that speaks to what the care collectives are today. Right. And how they've evolved over time. When I first started, I was so focused on numbers, right? And how many people do we have and how many people are we reaching? And I've come to understand that it's not so much about numbers, but it is about connection and relationships and creating that space where we're caring for each other and we actually feel cared for. Like our bellies are full, we're laughing, we're telling stories, we're connecting. And that is so much more important than, so just commending you for what sounds like a really wonderful evening.
Yeah, it really was. And one of the women who came was completely new. She actually only heard of us from the email blast that the AECEO put out. The young woman who had come from Thunder Bay, she was so excited to see one of the co-leads because she had hosted the book club for the AECEO, one of them. And she said, oh my gosh, when she walked in, what a personality she has. And so that was really, really exciting. And then just to follow up what Lyndsay is saying, I remember at the beginning of the year when I came back as a faculty, I remember saying to Lyndsay, oh, we only have like a handful of people that show up to the Care Collective virtual meetings. And she's like, that's okay. So I did have that piece as well around like numbers mean value and the importance of it. But man, the folks who really show up, they need that space. There's many of them that share stories that they're so isolated and they are one of a couple of people who are racialized within their workforce places, And it's been interesting working through that too, because there's a lot of storytelling and it's hard to navigate that online as well, because you want to hold space for someone to share that and navigating that and allowing that person to share until they feel like they've released, but then also paying attention to the time with others. So being in person, it definitely allowed us just to have that open free-for-all time.
I just want to kind of build on Lyndsay and Tonja. When you said we ended up staying an additional hour, we grazed again, and making that such a special evening for those that were able to come, that's building community. That's showing that you deserve more than, and you are deserving of. So I definitely love to hear that, because I've sat in that story of guilt myself and saying, oh, I wish there would have been more. But I need to flip that switch a little bit and say, I'm so glad the people that came were able to come and join in. So thanks for sharing that piece. And I'm glad they had the second round.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing similar journeys in your advocacy where you're able to look back at yourself and see things differently. These ideas of being concerned with outputs or things that can be evaluated, but you've all seemed to been able to shed that burden. And I want to ask Shelly, especially as somebody who spends their days evaluating people with very specific criteria, how are you able to see things differently and trust yourself to be able to evaluate in a whole new way?
It's a good question. I think it took a while, right? I remember when I even first started teaching at George Brown, I had a certain method in a way, and I was mentored in too by former colleagues, and they had their own systems. And slowly but surely, within I would say 2 years, I looked at the systems and said, okay, this is not working. This is not the way to do anything in terms of evaluation, teaching, etc. There was very prescribed ways of doing certain things. And so what I started doing was entertaining ideas from students themselves. I think that, and you know, when you said, Jess, that you didn't think I was accessible or whatnot, I think that's what a lot of people, even those in the field that are working in the field, find that care collectives or just the AECEO in general are having that fear that there is no place for them when there is. I'm trying to bring this all and mesh it all together, but try to hear from those voices that are often not heard from and silenced and invisible. And so hearing from students and asking them how they feel about assessment, thinking again about testing and what are we testing and why. So I always ask students, if you're going to do group work, and they're all like, oh no, group work. But what's the purpose of and why? Why are you against doing group work? And when you really hear the reasons, there a lot of the reasons are legitimate, that there's different working styles, etc. However, that's a learning process in itself. That assessment in general is changing, right? And the way we're evaluating what's effective, even with children in the field. I think being a racialized faculty member myself and having a lot of international students, it really shifted my practice significantly. I would say in the past 5 years, just being the international student liaison at George Brown for the past 10 years, I would only say in the past 5 years has my practice shifted towards their experience and shifted towards, well, what are their learning styles like? And so being from a family that's from India and having a lot of students from India and from Punjab, where my family's from, I just really had that connection in a different country, under different jurisdictions and rules and laws. And so how can we make that more seamless for our learners? Because I think adults often find that they're not asked about their opinions. My research in the past was all about hearing from children, which is still very important, but now it's more about how can we hear from our students? Even just thinking about the AECEO itself and asking students what they think about the AECEO, what are their thoughts and what are their fears and what's holding them back. Often one of the first things I do when I meet with students is I ask them for some of their goals. It's really interesting to see that a lot of students have a lot of passions and goals to connect, to build community, to do well, of course, and to be a great and impactful kind of educator. And so they have these goals and passions. It's just how do we get them? That's something that I think I'll learn forever. I don't think I have the answer. I try different things every year as well. You see, and COVID did change a lot. One of the ways that we are rebuilding is we're revamping student-led initiatives as well. So having students be engaged in a committee called the Educators in Action Committee. International students that want to have mentorship. So I've created a mentorship program between first and second year students. I always say you have to sometimes be uncomfortable to get comfortable. So I gave you a long-winded answer there, but I think this kind of ties in together, that when we hear from those in the field or hear from students training to be in the field, etc., we get a better kind of community.
Yeah, I'm listening to all of you, and I'm going to flip the script a little bit here and ask you, what was that moment for you? One that's particularly in my mind right now was Rachel Brophy, who is one of your colleagues and an amazing professor, and really did have so many moments, like aha moments for myself. But I remember one in particular when I was in their class. And you know what, this is so funny, is I can't even remember what they called me out on, but they called me out on something. And it was in such a way that was caring, was clear, was helpful to my life, not even just to that subject matter. And it really did, like you said, flip kind of a switch for me in terms of how I was going to continue to be the educator that I wanted to be. And hearing you all, you seem to have, I don't think you can be that for someone else unless you've received that kind of care yourself. So is there a moment that any of you want to share where you really did feel that care And it may have been in a moment that was unpredictable or not necessarily typical for ECE.
It kind of builds on Shelly's story where she talks about, wanting to be there for the students. So 30 plus years ago, one of the professors at Cambrian College invited me to a conference, an advocacy conference with the OCBCC and the AECEO were there and excited and a mature student, but still young. I walked into this huge space and there was round tables filled with people and numbers. And I said, oh, there's lots of tables because that's like 300 and something. And oh, look at that number, 400. And I found out those were locals, like Union 2424 or whatever the unions were. And the conference started and there was this open mic type session where there was a panel and up for questions. And I was like, I have found my people. This is what my work of an ECE is going to be as part of my life, ingrained in this. And it was because that faculty saw that in me, that said, you have a voice to share in whatever way that looks like. So I didn't start off out with the AECEO as being a real talkative person. I had a lot of anxiety and didn't like to speak in front of crowds, but that space gave me that opportunity and be vulnerable. And it was okay to do that. So thanks to that professor, thanks to the faculty that are here with us today, and that you're touching the hearts of so many wonderful ECE student learners. Bravo to all of you.
Does anyone else have any other stories of how they sort of got invited in?
I like to talk about how I elbowed my way in, because I started working in the ECEC kind of research part of the sector. And that was so amazing because I was able to learn, we were doing policy research specifically. And that gave me the opportunity to learn about childcare policy in Canada and how it has evolved over time. And then also learning about the childcare advocacy movement in Canada. And while I was working in policy and research, I was also working for the national advocacy organization at the time. It's now Childcare Now, and it used to be the Childcare Advocacy Association. So I was doing both of those roles. And I was coming to those roles as an early childhood educator, coming from programs. So I had that perspective and that identity. I am an early childhood educator. This was some time ago now, but I saw that the early childhood educators weren't there and their voices weren't sought out. We were talking about spaces. We need more funding, parent fees need to come down, all of these things that are very important, but we'll tackle the workforce issues, once we secure these other things. And that was kind of a lot of what I was hearing. What I found was that a lot of the leaders, right, the people who were being asked to speak to media, the people that were being invited to meetings with politicians and representing, the needs and the wants of the childcare sector, they were not early childhood educators. They had never been early childhood educators. They were researchers in their own right. They were very knowledgeable people, and they didn't speak about the needs and the wants of early childhood educators. Quite frankly, they didn't see early childhood educators as capable of having these conversations. And that bothered me so much because from my experience working in programs, at our lunch break, 15-minute break, that's all we're talking about. How could our program be better? How could our lives be better? Well, our program could be better if our lives were better, right? And every day we're talking about policy and advocacy at the lunch table as early childhood educators. And I just said, you know what? ECEs are a huge untapped source of mobilization for childcare advocacy in Ontario and across Canada. We're talking about thousands and thousands of ECEs who love their work and who want to see change. And why on earth are we not seeing ECEs as capable leaders and advocates in this part of the sector. And that's really what drove me in my earlier years of getting into advocacy, to say, I want to hear what other early childhood educators have to say. And let's focus on empowering our voices as ECEs. Let's get over this fear that advocacy is not professional. If we say what we actually need and what we actually want as early childhood educators, that it's not somehow taking away from what children need and want and what families need and want, that it's all one and the same, and we all have the same goal in the end, and that is early childhood education that is good for children, good for families, and a good place to work for early childhood educators. And so that's why I like to say I kind of forced my way into it, because at the time when I started out, our perspectives were not sought after and we were not seen as capable. And I think there are some institutions where that's still the case. And I think we have to just continue exactly what we're doing, and that's caring about each other.
So well said, Lyndsay. And I love that you were not going to wait for someone else to say, okay, it's your turn now. Like, we're not going to wait. We can do it ourselves, and we just need the space and the time like that you all provide. But I'm curious about Tonja. Tonja, what about you? What was your previous advocate self like? And was there a turning moment?
I went to George Brown. I did my early childhood education diploma, completed that at George Brown. And I had a professor named Marie Goulet, and she was absolutely one of my favorite people in the world. I remember finally being able to joke with her because, as we've heard already with Shelly and Jess saying, and I remember just sort of seeing past that with Marie Goulet and thinking her passion kind of came across as a little bit intimidating and scary to other, folks in my class. And just like, I'm going to just talk to her, and she's human. And I remember saying, like, Marie, I want to be you when I grow up. And I just like, was this 18-year-old, right, joking around with her. And she was surprised and taken aback. But, I saw her living in downtown Toronto many, many times, running into her. And we always had a bond. We always connected. We talked about her daughter. We talked about life. We talked about what I was doing and where I was going and where she was at and what was happening with her and the ending part of her career as well. And I think in terms of being a professor and being that sort of in that academia side, I think she really guided me in terms of, I have very high expectations. And I remember, my students, learners saying that as well, like, oh, Tonja, you're tough, you're this, you're that. But then I remember hearing the flip side of that was, she's going to help you through whatever it is that you need to hand in, or how you want to be assessed, or how we are being assessing them. And so I feel like Marie Goulet did that for me. Like, she had really, really high quality expectations of all of us. And she always said, and she had these funny, interesting, like, hand movements and gestures. And she always said, you're going to meet the children where they're at. And I remember having interviews for jobs and like, oh, so, how do you think EC has changed or something would generally be a question. I was like, well, has it? Like, we're always meeting children where they're at. Isn't that like the basis of what we do? And so that is, talking about intersectionality, talking about race, talking about socioeconomic status, talking about all of these things. This is where children are at. So really, that's the basis of relationships as well. Again, Marie Goulet was really influential. We sort of broke that barrier down, and I felt like I could joke with her, engage with her, and really just be a person. So really, that's part of who I am and what I try to model, humanizing each other as well, right? And I think that's kind of come across from all the things we've been sharing. I was going shopping and I had stopped somewhere and I had frozen vegetables, and I was like, no, that's okay. I can let these de-thaw because I'm talking to Marie Goulet. I valued that time too, because shortly after that she had passed away. So I really, really was like, yeah, this is special.
Oh, thanks for sharing. Yeah. There's a moment where you talk about something that was kind of difficult, but you all have smiles on your faces. And I wonder if anyone has some insight on that barrier to a lot of ECEs and childcare workers doing the thing because they imagine it's going to be more difficult than it's worth. Like, the juice is not worth the squeeze. But I'm seeing all of you do the thing, the difficult thing, or like the scary thing, and you're recalling it with such joy and with such fondness. What advice or things that you think could unpack that a bit?
When we think about advocacy, we can think about, oh my gosh, that's so much, that sounds like so much extra work, and my tank is already empty. So how can I possibly advocate for decent work and better pay and to be recognized as the professional that I am when my tank is on empty? The way that we have been able to do that is by centering the care aspect and saying, yes, our advocacy efforts are important and it is a lot of work and a lot of commitment, but we are able to do that because we come together and we create these communities of care where, yes, we have all the business to talk about, but how are you? Are you okay? And if there is something that someone needs to talk about in a meeting, we give space for that. So by centering care and relationship building and connection, then we get to know each other on a human level. We get to know each other, and our children are in our meetings with us. Our spouses are in the background doing whatever. Our dogs are barking, right? And we have space and time for all of that. And the advocacy work gets done and we feel good about it and we're able to celebrate it together, right? So when we center care, when we take care of each other and make time for each other, then it's joyful. And then I think about when I do go to do that advocacy action, maybe I'm at Queen's Park and someone asks me, can I give you this microphone and can you do this chant in front of everybody off the top of your head? I think, yes, I can do that. And I'm going to bring with me all of the educators that I've connected with, that I've met over the years. They're all coming with me onto that stage. All of their stories, all of their hard work, and we're doing it together. And that is so much fun. That allows us to find joy in the struggle. Because if we're not able to laugh together and cry together, then how are we going to make change together? Being able to center that care, that is what has gotten me through the years, and that's what keeps me here.
Wow. When you said that, it reminded me a bit of Tracy, because Tracy, although maybe college Tracy wasn't as loud, I don't think you're loud now either, but more so.
Oh, I can be loud.
But you're brave. How do you do that and still stay motivated and not weighed down?
And this is where I get vulnerable. And I think it's because I have the strength of those who came before me and fought for early childhood educators and education 25, 30 years prior to me coming on. So I can stand with pride and passion for what we're deserving of. It's because I can't imagine the struggles that were before me. And now thinking back on my career, we were fighting for an increase in wages to at least cost of living, back 30 years ago, and we're excited about that. So I just think about those stories of those brave women, and someone called me a pioneer once, and I said, "Oh, I'm not the pioneer." I said, "There's others before me, and I do this because of them and with them."
You see, you're always so humble, but there is something very magical about you too, because I've seen you deliver. If someone else did it, it would be very biting, but you're able to deliver the most clear and concise message and still be entirely lovable at the same time.
Okay, I have to share one story. So at one point, I was honored to be the president of the Ontario Coalition for Better Childcare. Don't ask me years. It seems like yesterday. Our funding was going to be cut. Like, we were at Queen's Park and there was not going to be any additional funding. And I had this press release kind of pressed, and the government that was sitting at that time came in and said, "Okay, just hold on. The minister is going to come in and there's going to be an announcement and it's in your favor." you are not letting me speak after you've put all of us on edge for this long. So the coalition team said, Tracy, you need to be nice. And I'm like, okay, but you got to think, I was pumped. The room was filled with people. It was hot. And we were there to advocate and share why we were deserving to keep this funding. And the minister came up, gave us what we were there for and bridged the funding, and everything was happy. And I went up and said a thank you. And then she went up and said, I've never had someone thank me with a smile that felt like there was a knife twisting in my back. And I said, thank you for that. But that feeling is because we are so passionate, and that everybody needs to understand the work that we do, including our politicians. And it's the voices of families and children and our teams that are coming with me to this point. And for you to hold us at the end of a rope for so long, and then to kind of, okay, I'm coming in like a knight coming in shining armor. No, you're not. This is what we deserved before. So yes, I can say it with a smile because we won and I'm deserving. And it's not really about that winning and losing, but with the government and with advocacy, sometimes we have to put those notches on our broom handle and say, yes, we were successful. We did this and we did this together. And it might have taken 50 years. I remember the day that we signed the Canada-wide early learning and childcare agreement. It's not everything that we wanted, but it was a start. And finally, everybody signed. I was having a hallelujah party. I was so excited. Those pioneers way before me, that I stood there and celebrated with them for that. Thank you for noticing my passion for this. Like I said, many years ago, I didn't have that voice. The AECEO gave me opportunity to have professional learning where I learned how to speak to media. We had media people come and the camera was right up to our face and they were asking us questions and I'm like, whoa, okay, let's start over. I found out when you speak from your heart, that's where it comes through so clearly. I speak from my heart. I know what's best for educators across the province and across the country for sure. And I know that these care collectives can bring us together. It's not about I'm faculty or I'm a executive director or a program supervisor. We come together as advocates for children and families and our teams. And that's it. So it's not about a position. It's about this hard work.
This is so refreshing too, because I don't think typically ECEs and childcare workers allow themselves to identify what makes them so unique, what makes them so authentically effective in their work. But that is exactly what the care collectives are meant to be. We're not all trying to be one type of advocate. We're trying to find out what is the best for you and which way that you want to be an advocate. Tracy is that smile, but also able to deliver you that hard-hitting message. And I think that actually my thing that I bring out here is maybe a bit like Lyndsay. I'm going to be able to do what you need me to do because I believe in it. And it's going to be pretty hard to stop me and my peoples. We are strong. So that's my thing, is I am tenacious. I will keep going and wear you down. Like you said, not many people will want to put those notches, but hey, I'll notch my broomstick. That's fine. I'll do it if that means that we're making movements. So let us in on what you think your specialty is in this advocacy.
I think one of the things that I have a good grasp on is getting people to think outside the box and to say the uncomfortable. I remember when I was doing my master's at AECEO, and just to challenge even those that were superior to me, even somebody like Charles Pascal, who was on my thesis committee, and challenging them to think outside the box and about kind of entry points into the work. I was looking at race and children's racial understandings, their own racial understandings, and the understanding of the race in others, and trying to let even just my own supervisors know that children do have racial preferences very early on. But my supervisor was very uncomfortable talking about race. And like my supervisor was a very well known, and I asked her to be uncomfortable with me, and we could bounce off each other. That's what I would say would be my expertise. Shelly will say the thing that'll get everybody twisting and turning, to think about something.
Oh, Shelly, we need folks like you and Lyndsay Are you ready to boast and brag?
This is not my strong suit. Hopefully. I mean, I hope people don't see me as like, oh, Lyndsay always talking about herself. I think it can be hard for early childhood educators and for people in our sector to reflect on and talk about their strengths, because as a profession, we're constantly being asked to engage in professional learning, and that's a good thing. So it can be hard for us to say, well, yes, I have all of these things that I want to learn about and I want to improve on, but here are my strengths. And I'm definitely in that boat as well. But I think I've always really seen the power and how special early childhood programs are. I really, truly value the work of early childhood educators and what they're doing in their programs. I had been visiting the Humber Child Development Center as much as possible and reading books with the children and just joining in on program to be in that space and to start building relationships with the educators who work at the Humber CDC. And that is such an honor. And I hope at least that it gives the students that I work with and the early childhood educators that I meet, that it reminds them of their value. In every circumstance, I want to gas up early childhood educators. I want to be like the number one cheerleader. I think and I hope that that's my strength.
Thank you so much for joining us. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider becoming a member. The link to join us will be in the episode description. Your membership makes a difference in the lives of ECEs and childcare workers, children, and families, and allows us to continue doing this work. To all the members currently supporting us, thank you so much. To all the ECEs and childcare workers listening, I believe in you and your dreams for children everywhere.